Happy Sunday, everyone. It's Easter. It's my favorite Sunday of the year. Today we celebrate the most important thing in the entire year, the resurrection of Jesus. We believe that Jesus came and he died on the cross and then he rose again and he is now alive. He is risen. He is risen indeed, and he is alive. He longs to make himself known to us. He longs to reveal himself to us. That means that you and I, we can get to know this Jesus in a very personal way. Some of you may know Jesus already. Others of you, you may be here and you're curious about what this whole thing is about at Easter. I'm glad you're here because today we want to go on a journey together. Not here, but at Mauer Park. So come along with me to Mauer Park and we're going to go on a journey to discover the Easter story together. Let's go right in. We're beginning our journey right here at the Berlin Wall at Mauer Park, and I want to tell you about a guy named Simon. Simon and his family, they lived in Libya in North Africa, but by faith Simon was a Jewish man, and his faith was really important to him. So every year he went on a trip to Jerusalem, on a pilgrimage where he would celebrate the Passover festival. You have to imagine just what this was like. For Passover, that's the biggest celebration for Jewish people, where they remember that God delivered them from slavery in Egypt, right? And every year for Passover, this city was jam-packed. There were tens of thousands of people from all over the world, all the Jewish people from the diaspora. They came together in Jerusalem to celebrate together this joyful celebration of Passover. And Simon was one of them. And I imagine he probably found a place to stay somewhere outside of the city. And on that Friday morning, he got up very early to wash himself and cleanse himself, because the Jewish people believed that you had to first go through a cleansing ritual so that you are clean, and then you put on your finest clothes and you smell right, and then you are allowed to enter the temple. Okay, and that ritual of cleansing wasn't a duty. It was I guess a ritual of anticipation and joy. You know, I imagine he was standing in the shower that morning. He's like, I get to worship in the temple in Jerusalem today. He was so excited. And then when he was ready, finally, he went on his way towards the city, to Jerusalem, to worship in the temple. And as soon as he walked through the city gates, Simon heard a noise from a crowd of people somewhere inside the city, further inside, really loud, loads of voices shouting. And he thought, oh, maybe some kind of ritual for the Passover celebration, or maybe a sports event or something. But then as he listened, he also heard, hold on, there's people there who are crying and weeping. So he thought, oh, maybe it's a funeral. But then as he listened again, he also heard voices of, like angry voices who were insulting someone, and also voices of laughter as well. And he couldn't quite understand what was going on, and he was curious. And so he thought, I'm going to go check out what's happening over there. And so he didn't really know where to go, right? But he just went kind of to where the noise was coming from, turned a few corners, and then he turned a corner, walked around a building, and then suddenly he was standing right in front of this crowd of people, in front of this mob of people. And he saw loads of people there, the fists kind of being shaken angrily in the air. He saw some Roman spears in that crowd as well. There were fruit and vegetables being thrown through the air. And then kind of in the middle of it, there were these three wooden beams, these wooden crosses that were slowly carried down the street. And so Simon, oh, I know what's happening here. He's seen this before in Libya. He realized this is a via crucis, a cross way. He realized there's 1, 2, 3 people who are about to be crucified in Jerusalem today. And kind of the opening act or the prelude of every crucifixion would be that those who were condemned to death, they would kind of be shot, down the street like dogs, and everyone would come out of their houses or their apartments to insult them, to ridicule them, to spit on them, so that kind of the entire shame and the embarrassment of this city would come on these convicted men one last time before they would be taken outside of the city to be crucified. So that's what was happening there. And Simon, he looked at the three men who were about to be crucified, and he realized that there's one of them who seemed to kind of get a lot of the attention of the people. And this guy, he looked already incredibly disfigured, as if he had been beaten and tortured all night. He looked fatigued, as if he hadn't slept in days. And Simon thought this guy, he's going to die before they even reach the city gates. He's done. Why are they even crucifying him? He's half dead already. And so he was curious about that guy, and he asked one of the other onlookers, and he said, "Who is this guy?" And this guy said, "Oh yeah, that's Jesus from the north, from Nazareth. Pilate had just sentenced him to be crucified today." And Simon said, "Well, what did he do to be crucified?" And the guy said, "I'm actually not really sure. I think he was a rabbi. I think he taught about God. I think he healed people. I'm not sure." And Simon said, "Well, is that why they crucify him here in Jerusalem?" But he just and he didn't get a response from him. And as Simon was looking closer, he also realized that not everyone in that mob was celebrating the fact that Jesus was about to be crucified. There were some there, especially women, who were crying, who were weeping. And at some point, Jesus, he even said something to those women. Simon couldn't quite understand it because of all the noise, but something about that they shouldn't weep for themselves, or they should weep for their children, or something about that. And he couldn't quite understand it. And then, actually, just after that, maybe just a few steps after this, Jesus fell to the ground. He collapsed, and Simon thought he died. But then he said, "Oh no, he's still moving, but he's not going to make it." And also the Roman soldiers around it, they weren't quite sure, because they still had to keep things going. They needed someone to carry the wood here, the cross. And so one of the Roman soldiers looked right at Simon, and he said, "You there, you carry that cross." And we need to understand that the Romans at the time, they could have asked for this. Anytime someone, a Roman needed something carried, he could ask any non-Roman to carry something for about 1 mile. And so this soldier asking Simon to carry the cross, Simon had no choice. He couldn't say no to this request. It was a command. And so he had to pick up this wooden cross, right, and load it on his shoulders. And also we need to understand that the Jews at the time, they believed the wood of a cross was cursed. It was cursed wood. It was unclean. Just imagine, like Simon was on his way to the temple. He wanted to worship. He cleansed himself to go to worship in the temple. That idea was out the window now as soon as he touched the wood. If he wanted to still go worship in the temple that day, he would have had to go back home, change his clothes, wash himself entirely, and then he could go to the temple, because the wood was cursed. It was unclean. But he had no choice. He had to carry it. So he picked it up, and he saw how the soldiers, they helped up Jesus, and they started to push him down the street in front of him, and he carried now this cross behind this Jesus. And as he was looking down, he saw that right in front of him, the blood and the sweat drops from Jesus's body just fell on the hot pavement right in front of him. And that's how they now, this whole scene, right, how they made their way out of the city gates, and then up on a little hill. And I guess that's where they were going to crucify them now, up on that hill. And the soldier commanded Simon to just drop the cross on the floor, which is what he did. And then Simon was pushed to the side.
The soldier who was in charge of the execution had gone up to Calvary a little earlier to prepare everything. And he had certainly seen many things, but Jesus was horribly disfigured. Jesus was hardly recognizable as a human being. And they had already beaten and flogged him in the city. He was barely able to stand on his feet. The soldier had likely crucified many people before, but something was different with this one. It had probably been quite satisfying for him to be the one who gets to execute justice. But something seemed different about this convict. They tore off Jesus' clothes, they laid him on the cross, and the soldier knew that crucifixions were not so easy. He knew the first nail is always the most difficult. Normally, the convict would try to fight back with their hands and feet, so they'd need several soldiers holding the man down. But again, there was something different about this convict. Jesus did not resist. He's probably too weak already, the soldier thought to himself. And so, they took the nails and they hammered the nails through his feet and hands. And Jesus wailed in pain. The soldier actually expected that Jesus would plead for mercy, right? But Jesus did not insult the soldiers. He did not plead for mercy. In fact, he looked at them with a strange love in his eyes and said, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." And the soldier was amazed. What kind of man is this that he forgives us for his execution? The soldier could not believe it. There was something extraordinary about this Jesus. And it was as if he wanted to be on that cross. I mean, on the outside it looked like a defeat, like a tragedy. But Jesus seemed convinced that it was a victory. So they lifted up the cross, and the crowd was cheering and laughing.
Not far from that cross, there was a group of women and also a man standing with them. They weren't mocking with the rest of the crowd. They weren't rejoicing. They weren't celebrating the fact that Jesus was now hanging on a cross. They were weeping. They were devastated. They could not believe what they had to witness right in front of their eyes. The man who was standing there, his name was John. And he had been Jesus' best friend for the past years. About 3 years ago, actually, he had left everything behind to follow this Jesus. And they had walked all throughout the province, and John got to witness the ministry of Jesus. He got to be there when Jesus preached good news, and he explained so wonderfully the secrets of God to people. And he got to be there when Jesus healed people and he took care of people. He loved people. He fed people. It was so wonderful. These last 3 years, John loved every second of these past 3 years. He never felt so close to God as in the past 3 years. Just the night before, they were actually all together and they had dinner together. Jesus and all the friends, and John got to sit right next to Jesus. And they had a great time together. And at some point, while they had dinner, Jesus took a piece of bread and a cup, and he said, "Friends, these two things, they symbolize what I'm about to do for you." And the disciples, the friends of Jesus, they were looking at each other. They didn't quite understand what he was talking about. And Jesus tried to explain, just like you can tear bread apart, so my body will be torn apart. And just like you can pour out wine, so my blood will be poured out, it will be shed for you. But the disciples didn't quite understand what Jesus was referring to. And now John was standing beneath that cross, looking up to his friend crucified. And he thought, well, surely that can't be what he meant. That can't have been the plan that he had in mind. Why would God allow this to happen, that the Messiah, the great liberator, that he would now die on a cursed Roman cross? That can't be it. Surely not. And then as he looked up to Jesus, he heard Jesus whimpering in pain, and he actually noticed, hold on, Jesus is praying. He's praying a prayer. What is he praying? And then he heard Jesus' prayer. Jesus was saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And John said, well, that's probably what happened now. God had forsaken him. God's no longer with him. God's left Jesus. It's even worse than that. It seems like God's punishing Jesus, as if God has cursed Jesus, as if there's a punishment, a humiliation of God that is now on Jesus. And John couldn't understand it. Among the women, there was Mary Magdalene, a woman who had been healed by Jesus. And then also among the women was Mary, the mother of Jesus. I mean, can you imagine this? For a mother to have to watch her own son being crucified, and she just has to watch this happen. I mean, I can't bear that thought. What must have been going on inside, in the heart of Mary, the mother of Jesus? I'm sure as she was standing there, she thought back to the day when the angel had come to her all those years ago and announced to her that she was going to be the mother of the Messiah. And I'm sure she thought, well, where is that angel now? Why is no one doing anything? God, why are you not doing anything? Why is this happening? Why is no one intervening? But nothing happened. You know, Mary, she loved this responsibility that she had, that was entrusted to her, that she got to be the mother, the prime caretaker of the Messiah himself. She loved it. She loved taking care of Jesus. She loved providing for him, looking after him. She was with him wherever he went, and she looked after his every need. And now he was hanging on the cross, and she had to watch what was happening helplessly. She couldn't even help him. She couldn't even offer him a drink when he just screamed out that he's thirsty. She couldn't help him. And then Jesus, he looked down from the cross, and he saw John and the women standing there, and he saw his mother, and he said to John, John, my friend, please take care of my mom. She needs someone now who takes care of her. Please look after mommy. And John, he probably just nodded. I'm sure he couldn't even respond. And he's like, yes, I'll take care of your mother. And then it was around noon that day. Jesus and the other two, they have been hanging on the cross already for several hours, fighting for their every breath, agony, pain. And then suddenly it got dark, pitch black night, as if someone switched off the sun. It was as if creation itself could not bear watching what was happening right now. So it was dark. Some people went back home. Certainly the crowd got a bit quieter. There was less laughing. There was less insulting. But Mary and John, they remained under the cross there, and they didn't want to leave Jesus in his last moments. They wanted to go and be there with him. And that went on for about 3 hours or so, just pitch dark. And every now and then they had looked up, because it was so dark, they could hardly see. Is he still alive, or is he already dead? Is he still moving? And then sometimes they could hear a scream, or some women in agony, or he moving around a little bit again. And oh yeah, he's still here. He's still with us. And like I said, that went on for about 3 hours. And then after 3 hours, Jesus lifted himself up one last time on the cross a little bit to take a breath. And he screamed out into that darkness. And then he fell back down and he said a final prayer, and he said, Abba, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And that's how Jesus died.
The normal custom was that the dead bodies would remain on the cross for days, sometimes weeks. The convicts were to rot in the heat of the sun and be devoured by the birds. Everyone should see what would happen to people who defied Rome. But for Jesus, an exception was made. A man called Joseph, who was a member of the council and secretly a disciple of Jesus, wanted to bury the corpse of Jesus and pay him a final tribute. And so Pilate released the body. And I would like to ask a very practical question. How do you take a dead body down from a cross? And not just anybody, but the body of Jesus. And I almost can't bear that thought. I mean, this broken corpse in which God himself dwelt. These staring eyes that had looked so lovingly on people. And these lips cracked open by fever and thirst that had spoken nothing but the truth. And these hands that once had assembled furniture and later healed so many people. And now Joseph had to pull the nails out of these hands. So Joseph takes down Jesus' body from the cross and it falls lifeless into his arms. And I wonder if he pricked his fingers trying to untangle the crown of thorns. I wonder if he talked to the dead body the way we sometimes still talk to people even after they have passed on. I mean, we don't know what Joseph was thinking or feeling. We only know that he washed Jesus' body and wrapped it in clothes and placed it in a tomb. Nicodemus, a Pharisee and also a secret disciple of Jesus, helped him, and they had to do it quickly because the next day was the Sabbath. And on the Sabbath, you weren't allowed to bury the dead. So Joseph and Nicodemus laid Jesus in a tomb, a kind of cave, and rolled a heavy stone in front of the entrance. And I wonder if Nicodemus stood in front of the big stone for a few more moments. And I am sure he remembered the conversations he had with Jesus. Jesus had told him so many wonderful things. Unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. The Son of Man must be lifted up on a pole so that everyone who believes may have eternal life. God so loved the world that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Nicodemus had believed Jesus, and Nicodemus had hoped in Jesus. But now, Jesus was dead. All hope was buried. "Rest in peace, Rabbi," he said, and he stroked the large stone with his hand and went home.
The next day was the Sabbath, the Saturday. The Sabbath is the day of rest where no one was allowed to do anything. And we have no idea what happened on that day after the crucifixion of Jesus. Nothing is being said about this day. We know, or we can assume, that Joseph and Nicodemus, they probably had to switch gears a little bit because they had to now focus on their tasks, their duties in the temple for the Passover festival. And so I'm sure they just tried to kind of switch gears, like I said, and focus on these duties. Simon, the man who carried the cross for Jesus, he disappeared from the scene completely, for now at least. The soldier who had oversight over this whole crucifixion, we don't know what happened to him. The only thing we know is that apparently after Jesus had died, he looked up to this dead body on the cross and he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." And that's what we know about the soldier. We know that John, Jesus' best friend, he had taken Mary back home with her. I mean, all the other disciples, they had already disappeared when Jesus was arrested, right, in the Garden of Gethsemane. They went into all directions. They abandoned him, their best friend, they abandoned him. They must have felt so pathetic on that day. They have abandoned their master, their Messiah. They've left him. Especially think of Peter. Peter, who had been walking with Jesus, and Jesus had such high hopes for Peter. Jesus had said, "Peter, you are my rock. On this rock I will build my church." And now Peter, because he had denied even knowing Jesus. 3 times he had denied him. He knew he was such a disappointment to Jesus. He couldn't live up to these high expectations that Jesus had for him. In the hour of Jesus' greatest need, Peter had left him by himself. He had denied that he knew him. He must have felt like such a loser on that day, on that Saturday. And then the women around Mary Magdalene, they also were forced to sit still on that day. They had prepared different spices and different lotions, and it was custom at the time that they would go to the dead body and kind of, as kind of a last honoring act, they would prepare the body for rest. But they couldn't do this, and because it was Sabbath, you weren't allowed to do anything on the Sabbath. And so they were forced to rest and wait for another day, for Sunday, which is the beginning of the week for them. And they were forced to wait. And I wonder what they did while they had to wait. I wonder if there were somewhere crying together. I'm sure they were crying together. I wonder if they were talking about the things that just happened. Or maybe they just stopped talking. I mean, because what was there now to talk about?
In the Gospel of John, we read that Mary Magdalene got up early on Sunday morning. It was still dark, but she was already on her way to the tomb. And when she got there, she saw that the heavy stone had been rolled away. Mary did not know that an angel of the Lord had rolled away the stone. All she saw was that the tomb was open, and she did not go one step further. Instead, she turned around and ran back into the city to find the disciples. And she ran into Peter and John. And Mary, completely out of breath, tells the 2 of them about the stone that was rolled away. And immediately she offers a guess as to what might have happened. She was really sad and angry. They have taken the Lord away from the tomb, and I don't know where they have put him. Why would they do such a thing? Haven't they done enough to him? Why do they want to desecrate his body now?
So Peter and John, right, they start running as fast as they can to the tomb. They wanted to see what was going on, what Mary Magdalene had told them about. Something has happened. They wanted to see it with their own eyes. And apparently John was faster, and he arrived there first, and he got to the entrance of the tomb, and he was the first person to look inside the empty tomb from the outside. And he saw there was no one there. It was empty. It was empty. There was just a few linen cloths who were lying there. That was it. And then Peter also arrived, and he didn't, like John, wait outside of the tomb. He ran straight into the tomb, and he stood right in front of the place where they had laid the body of Jesus. And all he saw were the linen cloths of Jesus, the linen cloths that they had wrapped him in. They were now there, folded up in order. And even the other cloth that they had put on his face, it was there, it was rolled up in order. And Peter was thinking to himself, well, if someone would have wanted to desecrate the body of Jesus, or someone would have stolen the body of Jesus, surely they would have left chaos behind, not order. And why would someone take a body and leave the cloth behind? That doesn't make sense. Whoever was here didn't leave chaos behind, but left order behind. And Peter is thinking, right, is processing. I only know one person who brings order into chaos, and that's God. Was God here? And then he turned to the entrance and said, John, come in here now. Come in and have a look at this. And then John walked into the tomb, and he starts to smile. He starts to smile. It says in the Bible that John saw and believed. He saw and believed. And the way I imagine it is that he turned to Peter and says, of course he's no longer here. Peter, he must have risen. He must be alive. Didn't he tell us that that's what he was going to do? That on the 3rd day he would rise again to defeat sin, to defeat death, to defeat all that destroys us so that he can give us life. Peter, he must be alive. And then the two of them, they left the tomb and they were smiling. They had a holy hunch, a holy hunch that the impossible might have happened in Jerusalem on that morning.
And Mary Magdalene, she had also followed the two disciples back to the tomb. She was still standing outside the tomb weeping. And when the two disciples walked out of the tomb with shining eyes, she too wanted to look inside the tomb. And when she looked inside, she saw something that Peter and John did not see. Two angels, dressed in white, were sitting where Jesus' body had been laid. And Mary froze. "Why are you weeping?" the angel asked. "Why do you seek the living among the dead? The living. He is not here, Mary of Magdala. He is risen." And then they said, "Remember what he said to you. He foretold it to you, didn't he? The Son of Man would be crucified and then rise again on the third day," and that's exactly what happened here. And Mary Magdalene slowly began to understand. So all this was part of the plan. This is how Jesus was going to defeat sin. The punishment was laid upon him that we might have peace. And by his wounds, we are healed. And now we have a living hope because Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. And Mary looked over her shoulder and saw someone standing behind her. It was Jesus. But she did not recognize him. She thought he was a gardener. But then he said her name, Mary. And it sent shivers down her spine. In John 10, we read that the shepherd calls his sheep by name and they follow him because they know his voice. And she turned around and shouted out, "Rabboni, my master!" And she fell on her face before him to worship him, of course. And then Jesus said, "Don't hold on to me. Go instead to the others and tell them that I am alive." And it must have been difficult for Mary to let go of Jesus at that moment. But she made her way to the disciples and proclaimed the Easter message to them. "Friends, I have seen the Lord. He is risen indeed."
Guys, this is our story. This story we just heard is our story. The central event in the history of humanity, that's our story. That's at the center of our church because we know, we have experienced that Jesus, he came for us, he died on the cross for us, but he didn't stay on the cross. He didn't stay in the tomb. He left an empty tomb behind because he's alive. And he's alive today and he wants to engage with us. He wants to meet us. He wants to make himself known to us and he wants us to walk in our lives with him and follow him. And you know, this invitation that we just heard about at the end that Jesus had on the morning of his resurrection, this invitation that he had for Mary Magdalene, or invitation, or almost like a command or a calling for her life, to say, don't hold on to me, but go to the others and let them know that I am indeed risen, that I am alive. That calling is also our calling as a church. I think that's why we are here in Berlin. For this very reason, that we get to share this news. Any one of us who has experienced the risen Jesus, we don't hold this in, we share it with the world. That means we go to our neighbors, we go to our co-workers, to the people that we live with at school, wherever. We go to the people that we meet because we have this amazing news to share. Friends, I have seen the Lord. Amen.